Hello and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show episode. What is it? 176. Welcome back. I hope you're all doing very well. And let us see who all is there on the live chat. As always, let me greet all of you, as many of you as I can. I can see Jai, Tanmay, Chirag, Ramita, Harshit Badoria. Hello, anonymous gentleman. Kanhai Bhatt, Jean 1045, Tejas, hello, Illuminati Creek, hello, Rajat Duhan, AS Atul, Captain Cool, Yummy, Krishnanu Sharma, Captain Rogers, Nitin, Ajay Kumar Akula, Milind Asmenor, hello, Arintker, Vladimir Zelensky, Imperial JAP Gaming, Sam Sahu, Green Ray, Tamatonga, as Jijin, Threadripper, Abhinav, Jijin, I can see some names being repeated. Okay, Brijesh, Saurabh, AS, Alok Bhatt, Surya Pavan, Songa Fonga, Arshdeep Singh, Atish Digpal, RA Gaming, Bharagab, Tushar, Thunder Striker 303, Arhavi, Neeraj, Pradyumna, Ronit, Atharva Chauhan, Rashtravadi Shovan, Gyroscope, Simplia Veeb, Ajay, Doc M, Dev, Julie Leo Dun, Boyfriend, Rolla Avinash, Galaxy Impact, Shekhar, Polly, Discombobulation, Hitansh, Dia Selj, Arijit Paul, Rohit, Pratishwar, Piyush, Hen X Chetan, RSR Farter, Fighter, Deepak, Seventh Day, and so many more. Romakshi, Rajarshi, Reboot Mankind, Vishnu Mohanan, Jay, Trupti, Trending 24 hours, Trupti, hello, Jubal, Yash, and so many other people. Thank you so much for being on this live stream. I really appreciate this. This live stream, as always, is brought to you by my geopolitics course, Geopolitics from First Principles. Many of you have asked me to create a course, so it is there. The link is in the description below. The link is ac.university. Check it out if you wish to. And with that, let us get into the questions. So go ahead, ask your questions, and I will try and take as many of these questions as is possible during this session. So, Rahul Sharma says, why is India's average IQ so low? 84. Some people say it's 82. First of all, like Nassim Taleb would say, IQ is a pseudo-scientific swindle. It's a joke. They ask a number of questions that, see, no question you can ask is without a bias. All questions have some bias. And if you are trained in certain disciplines, you may do better. If you don't have that much training in those disciplines, you may not do that well. Most IQ tests, I would say 99.9% of IQ tests are in the English language, and English is a foreign language for most Indians. So you take a random person, give him or her an IQ test in English, they may not understand the questions that well. There are so many factors. So that is one thing I would say that could contribute to these so-called low IQ scores, 84, 82, whatever you want to say. You give people IQ tests in their mother tongue, you will see a whole different set of scores that will emerge out of it. That's one. And secondly, there are other factors as well. Let's say you have an unbiased IQ test, and still, hypothetically, your nation or a certain set of individuals, a certain data set, scores low. There could be other factors behind it. Let's say you have a nation that is suffering from malnutrition. When a person has suffered from malnutrition as a child, they're going to have a decline. They're going to have a lower than average intelligence and all that. I'm not saying India is a country that suffers from malnutrition today, but historically, India was starved for 2 centuries by the British. And some of that would persist, some of that would linger. Even in the 1960s, 70s, maybe even the 80s, you had malnutrition in India because of the socialist policies of the government. So some of that lingers. There are lots of factors. You go to African nations and you give them IQ tests in English and they speak Zulu or Bantu or Swahili or whatever, they're going to do terribly in these IQ tests. And there is tremendous malnutrition in Africa and so many other factors. There are so many factors that go into this, and then people give you these simplistic rankings. Okay, this nation has this IQ score. That is so stupid, actually. So, if you look at Indians outside of India, they typically do better than everybody else. So how does that correlate with India's IQ scores? And people will argue that India sends the best of its people outside to the US and all, and that's why they do well. Well, that's not quite that much of an argument. Overall, Indians are, I would say, some of the most intelligent people in the world. The average person may not be that intelligent, maybe, but it's not the average person that defines the greatness of a nation. The greatness of a nation is defined by the 0.1%, the ones who truly contribute to the nation and to the society and take the society forward. So, all of you, I would say, raise your standards, try to be among the 0.1%. All right, next question. Next the question. Rashtravadi Showan says how to become a polymath. Look, you don't have to be a polymath. There is no need for a person to be a polymath. A polymath is a person who is excellent in multiple disciplines. Let's say you're excellent in painting, you're excellent at playing music, you're excellent at mathematics, you're excellent at history, and so on. Multiple disciplines, excellence in a number of multiple disciplines. That's called being a polymath. You don't have to be a polymath. If you Most people aren't equipped to be polymaths. Okay, there's nothing wrong with not being a polymath. There is nothing wrong with not having expertise in 78 different subjects. But if you have that mental capacity and bandwidth, if you are among those blessed few, then study. Spend time studying, reading, acquiring knowledge, acquiring specific domain expertise in multiple fields. Even if you are that intelligent, it still takes a whole lot of hard work to be a polymath. So you dive deep into subjects, deep, like significantly deep. You spend hours and hours, countless hours of study, burning the midnight oil, like they say, for years. That's when you become a polymath. It's not easy. It's not something you can do in your spare time. It's a full-time endeavor. So there you have it. Uh, there is contact. What manner of contact are we speaking about? Have we been contacted by an alien civilization? I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm sure we have not. All right. So let's see, what else do we have? Okay, let's see this one. Tanmay Pandey says, universities in our country have recently started mocking or making fun of history, epic, Ramayan. What should be done to teach these people a lesson? You know what? This is freedom of speech in India. This is Indian secularism. We are a secular nation. And in India, secularism means abusing and mocking and disparaging the native culture, the native civilization. That's what secularism means in India. This is something that will eventually change. The process of change has already begun. Today, there is a significant pushback when this happens. But these so-called university professors and academic staff, they are still mired in that old colonial mindset. They have gone through the process, through the meat grinder of the academic system, which turns them into zombies. The academic system is supposed to liberate you, right, intellectually, give you the intellectual tools to truly intellectually flourish. It's supposed to give you the ability to think critically and to see the world in the way it really is, and to make a significant contribution to the world, and so on. Well, the academic system in India and abroad, it takes bright young children, young kids with so much curiosity and intelligence and joie de vivre and all that, and it turns them into zombies. And it not just turns them into zombies and stultifies their ability to think critically. It not only kills their creativity, it not only creates their it not just kills their curiosity and exuberance and all that. It also brainwashes them into hating their own culture. And these people, eventually, the worst of the lot, typically the ones who comply the most with this, they rise to become professors, and they rise to high positions in academia. And then you will see things like this happen. So we need deep reforms in the education system. Well, not that deep, but okay, I won't say what I just thought out, but yeah, we need reforms. Gradual, proper reforms. Step by step reforms. Nothing too drastic. Over a period of, let's say, 10, 20 years, that needs to happen. And more importantly, it is for you all to push back against this. And you can't go ahead and push back physically, but you can express yourselves vocally and vociferously on whatever platforms you're on social media, on whatever else, in public, and push back against this. And the more this happens, uh, the less likely it's going to be that these people will keep on doing this. There's already a slow, tempering down of this Hindu phobia. I'll tell you what, India, Bharat is currently the world's most Hindu phobic nation. Okay, even if you go to certain, let's say, Middle Eastern countries, Indians or Hinduism gets better treatment. If you go to the US, Hinduism has, people who are Hindus have more rights than what they have in India. India is a Hindu phobic apartheid state because of the laws and the constitution and the policies of the various governments. I mean, state level, etc. governments. Things are changing. Things will change. It will take time. We have come out of several centuries of foreign occupation, and our institutions, our laws, all of that are deeply colonized even now. And our academic personnel are deeply mentally colonized. They're the worst possible people to teach our kids anything, and yet they're in charge. So I'm not gonna talk about teaching these people a lesson. What these people are merely symptoms of a deeper disease, of a deeper malaise. We have to address the root cause, not teach these people a lesson. We have to address the root cause by changing the system, by reforming the system, by reforming India's institutions, by reforming the laws, the constitution, all of that. It's going to take a deep-rooted change. It's going to take a long time, but it will happen. And what we all can do is push back against this nonsense, call them out, name and shame them, and if possible, take legal action. Because I'm sure that even within India's horrific system, I'm pretty sure that abusing religions, even the native religions, is probably illegal. Okay, you can take a look at the laws and, if possible, take legal action if this happens. But yes, there needs to be pushback, significant pushback against this. I'm not talking about teaching people lessons or resorting to any form of violence, but take proper action, legally acceptable action, and yeah, that's what needs to happen more and more. And we're gonna see a pushback against this. All right. Let us see what else we have. Let's see. Chirag Avasti says, why is Ukraine suddenly talking so much to India, and what's the whole geopolitical agenda behind the foreign minister's visit to New Delhi? Look, the West would like India to toe its line. The West, as in US, EU, NATO, all that. Essentially, the West means the US. All these so-called Western nations are proxies of the US. The US is the great empire, the sole superpower. And the US would like India to toe its line or kind of come towards its side when it comes to the Ukraine war, when it comes to sanctions against Russia, when it comes to India's stance on Ukraine and Russia and the whole situation, all that. They would like India to be on their side. And they will try various ploys and various kinds of actions from various angles to try and nudge India towards coming in their camp, right? So and as we know, Ukraine is not a free country. It's a proxy of the US. The current conflict in Ukraine is a proxy war between Russia and the US, and the two proxies are NATO and Ukraine. And NATO is a proxy of the US, and Ukraine is also a proxy of the US. Ukraine is a pawn on the big geopolitical chessboard. The Americans have put that pawn forward, and that pawn is being obliterated by Russia. Russia has been left with no choice. Ukraine is going to eventually cease to exist in the shape and form that it is today. About a quarter of the nation of Ukraine has already been eaten up by Russia, the Donbas region, Russian majority region, Russian-speaking region, and eventually the nation of Ukraine is going to be partitioned, most likely along the Dnieper River, and that's eventually most likely going to be its fate. So, if the Ukrainian foreign minister comes to India, he's essentially an ambassador of the West. And he has been essentially told to visit India and try and extract some kind of concession or something from India. So overall, it doesn't make any big difference. India is not going to change its geopolitical priorities, its geopolitical stand, just because somebody came and spoke to us. Our national interest comes first, as does the national interest of every country. Every nation has to prioritize their national interest. In the case of the EU nations, in the case of the NATO nations, they are forced to prioritize a different nation's interest over theirs. That is why those nations are not genuinely sovereign nations. Understand the meaning of sovereignty. India is a genuinely sovereign nation. There are maybe four nations in the world that are genuinely sovereign. One is the US, the superpower, the global empire. The second is Russia, fully sovereign. No one can tell Russia what to do. Third is China. Fourth is India. The four sovereign nations. And there are other nations that you would imagine are very powerful that are not truly sovereign. You think Germany is a sovereign nation? Ha ha. You think France is sovereign? France is more sovereign than Germany, much more sovereign, but not fully sovereign. You think Japan is sovereign? Japan is a nation under permanent military occupation, foreign occupation, and so on. So when it comes to Ukraine, the foreign minister coming to India and talking, it doesn't really make much of a difference for us. We will entertain the person, we'll go and talk to the person and give that person a proper welcome, as is befitting the status of a foreign minister of a country, but nothing beyond that. It makes no big difference. All right, enough about that. Let's take a different question. Tarun TAC, welcome. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Appreciate it, and I hope that you gain something of value here, as I'm sure you will. And thank you once again. Okay, AS says, I'm a second generation Indian immigrant in the UK, studying at Imperial in nuclear engineering. I'm interested in researching in thorium based small modular reactors. Do I have a chance in India? Well, I'm assuming you are a UK citizen. Well, when it comes to research in nuclear technology, research on nuclear technology in India, I'm not sure foreign nationals would be given an entry into that, first of all. In case you're not a foreign national, but you are living in the UK, there may be scrutiny. If you want to come to India and do research in thorium based reactors, then I'm sure there will be some extra scrutiny on your background from the Indian, well, the government of India, let's just say. And let's say you pass the scrutiny, you're in, then I'm not sure whether there is research at the university or academic level when it comes to thorium based reactors. I'm not sure there is. The research that is indeed happening would happen at the level of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center and various other uh, institutes or institutions where you have research being conducted, because this is a kind of sensitive technology. Nuclear technology is something that very few nations in the world have, and there is currently, whether you realize or not, I'm sure you do, my friend, there is a race for supremacy in thorium technology, and India is one of the nations that's at the forefront of thorium uh, research, thorium reactor research. So it is pretty sensitive, this particular field, this particular domain. There's going to be a small number of people who are going to be working on this. They're going to have a certain level of security clearance, pretty high level of security clearance, and so on. So I'm not sure that if you're a foreign national or a foreign resident, there's a lot of scope for you to do research on thorium based technologies, reactors in India. Even India itself has, I would say, I don't know how many students get a degree, a master's degree in nuclear physics every year. I'm sure that's tens of thousands. And how many of them get to work on this? Maybe a handful, maybe every year 10 or 20 of those. So yeah, there's tremendous competition, and there's so I think it's pretty difficult. Just being completely transparent and honest with you, it's pretty difficult to do this in India. I know, I understand where you're coming from. You are of Indian origin. You may want to give back to your, well, homeland, but I would say the chances are slim. But there's no harm. If you're really good at what you do, you may stand a chance. So I would say that be realistic that the chances may be less, but if you're really good at what you do, then it's possible that if you are like one of the brilliant students or researchers, you may get a chance, perhaps. There you have it. Okay, next, what do we have next? Let us see what else. Siddharth Singh Rajpurohit says, can BCC, what can BCCI do to make cricket a global sport like football? In the last World Cup, we only had 10 teams. There should there be more teams in the World Cup, just like FIFA World Cup? Look, it's a great question actually. The FIFA World Cup has, I mean, every single nation essentially plays football. You go to a small island, let's say in the South Pacific, like Tonga, like the Solomon Islands or whatever, you'll find kids playing football there. You won't find kids playing cricket there. Cricket is that weird sport. It's actually an Indian sport that the British reinvented. So if you go back to the days of the Mahabharata, okay, and you read about the Leela of Shri Krishna, when he was a kid, when the great Shri Krishna was a kid, he used to play on the banks of the Yamuna. And at one point in time, he hits a ball with his bat. And what happens? The ball goes and falls into the river, and then he has to go and fight a gigantic snake to get the ball back. What game was he playing? He was playing a game of bat and ball. So it's actually an Indian sport that the British somehow reinvented. Anyhow, now today, the sport of cricket is played only where the British colonized. Whatever countries they colonized for a certain amount of time. So India and Pakistan, the entire Indian subcontinent, everybody took to it naturally because it is kind of originally an Indian game. Okay, but apart from that, it's only a few countries where people even know that this game exists. So it's hard to make to expand the World Cup. Of course, I think 12 teams is way too less. Why couldn't you have teams like Zimbabwe or Kenya that have played in the past? Why can't you have them play in the World Cup? Why don't you also open doors for nations like Hong Kong, for instance, or whoever else, Namibia? I mean, let's have some diversity. I don't know why it has to be just 10 teams. I totally agree with the sentiment. There should be at least 12 or 14 teams. Expand the field a little bit. Have the Netherlands come in. There are plenty of countries that play reasonably good cricket. Ireland, Scotland, and so on. So I agree. I'm not sure why it's such a narrow field that they've made the last time. So I don't know what is the reason why they did that. I hope in the next World Cup it's more expanded, a slightly wider field to give us a little more variety and a little more diversity. But I don't know what is behind this. Maybe it's about money. Maybe that if Kenya plays Namibia, that nobody will watch. I don't know what it is, but ideally we should have more. So I agree with you. Pinky Devi says, Raja Hari Singh had sent 2 or 3 times the instrument of accession of Jammu and Kashmir to Mr. Nehru, Shri Nehruji, the great, magnificent Mr. Nehruji. But Shri Nehruji rejected it. Yes. Sometimes it is there that he wanted a separate state. Was he pro-India or not? I'm assuming you're asking me about Shri Nehruji. So so the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, Shri Hari Singh Ji, Maharaj Hari Singh Ji had sent the signed letter of accession, the instrument of accession, to the government of India, New Delhi, which is Mr. Nehru, 3 times, on 3 occasions. It was the exact same instrument of accession that every other princely state signed, and Mr. Nehru kept on rejecting it. Eventually, it was accepted by Mr. Mountbatten, not Mr. Nehru. And that was after the Pakistanis had already sent their troops into Jammu and Kashmir, and Srinagar was kind of under threat already. So I don't know what Mr. Nehru wanted. Maybe he wanted the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir to go to Pakistan. I'm not sure what he wanted, but his actions don't make any sense, considering the fact that the Indian Prime Minister is supposed to prioritize India's national interest, not the national interest of other nations. So Mr. Nehru is a one of a kind, unique person. He's most old timers, they worship Mr. Nehru, the father of what do they call it? Scientific temper. Oh, good God, was he a scientist? No. He was the father of scientific temper. What does scientific temper mean? I still don't know what it means, but yes, he was a very logical, rational person, a man of scientific temper. He loved speaking English. Nobody spoke English as well as him, not even the great Mr. Tharoor. He used to smoke, I don't know what sort of cigars. He used to have a plane, Air India plane, go to the West every other day to get in more cigars and have his, dress properly pressed and all. So I don't know. He was truly a magnificently great man. Probably he was too great for ordinary people like us to understand. So I don't know. Really, I don't know. I simply am at a loss when it comes to the actions of the great Sri Nehruji. Okay. Tarun TSC says, hello Ji, there is this man with a channel called whatever. He has reacted to me. Please answer back to him. He's getting very annoyed and biased. Look, I don't know who this is. Look, the other day I was walking on the street and there were some monkeys howling at me. Should I have howled back at them? You go walk on the street, there'll be a doggy, a dog who's going to bark at you for whatever reason. You're going to bark back at him or her. You don't react to just about anybody. No point. If someone's annoying and biased, you ignore them. Okay? So I am not interested in having this back and forth nonsense, this bullshit. Apologies to children who may be watching, but I'm not into that. I won't be doing that. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Nameless says, sir, if anybody has to start studying geopolitics, where should he begin with? From, please guide me. Begin with my geopolitics course. Geopolitics from first principles. The link is ac.university. And if you do not wish to purchase a course because it costs money, then start studying history. Spend a lot of time studying world history, not the history of your local, municipality. Just kidding, but study world history. Spend a lot of time, ideally 5 to 10 years, devouring world history, ancient history, more modern history, history from Europe, history from Egypt, history from China, Japan, Mesopotamia, India as well, despite it being so horrifically depressing at times, at least the past 1,000 years. Study world history, study the brutality, study the empires, the rise and fall of empires. Do that over and over again. And the more you do it, the more it will become apparent to you that history repeats itself in cycles, in cycles, and cycles. And it is because the human psychology has always been the same. Human psychology is the same, whether it is 10,000 years ago or today. And you will find that those cycles are still at play today. And that's how you will start understanding geopolitics and the motivations behind various geopolitical actions. So that's how you do it. Or you can take a shortcut and study my course, which gives you principles, straightforward principles, and so on. All right, that should be, yeah, that's the answer. Okay. Now, what else? Kanai Bhatt says, when is Dr. Rai's paper coming out? I'm assuming you're talking about Dr. Neeraj Rai, the geneticist at the Birbal Sahni Institute of Molecular Biology, Genetics, or whatever it is. Great guy, doing tremendous research, and I'm not sure when the paper is coming in. It's a paper about India's genetic makeup. It's essentially about the R1A star haplogroup. I believe they have collected the data, but I'm not sure when the paper will come in. So how about I give him a call today, tomorrow, whenever. Maybe tomorrow, it's a little late today. and let me find out. Yeah, I'll try and find out what is the exact situation right now. What's the status? Any idea when it's going to be published? So I personally don't know right now, but I'll try and find out. Okay, Thunder Striker 303. I got a question for you. What impact did the Industrial Revolution have on global economics and societies? So the Industrial Revolution was something that brought in automation, machine automation into lots of things. So there was more standardization of goods and products, and there was a very rapid pace at which goods and products could be churned out compared to before automation happened. So you first had the steam revolution. The Englishman James Watt was the inventor of the steam engine, which would eventually go to drive those, railways, trains. But it also was something that was used in various industrial applications. It had lots of industrial applications. So you had goods being mass produced as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution. You had more standardization of goods and all that. So one of the things it did was that industries became concentrated in specific regions, in specific areas, typically in metropolitan areas. So historically, this industrial revolution came out of England, essentially. It spread across Europe eventually. So before the Industrial Revolution, the elite of English society were the landowners. Okay, the nobility, the aristocracy. They used to own large tracts of land, And they were wealthy because that land was agricultural land. They would have peasants work on that, and they would give those peasants a little bit of money and a small place to stay in, but they would, you know, earn massive income from the agricultural produce that comes out of that land. So before the industrial revolution, the main source of revenue, money, wealth was land and agricultural produce. And the big land owning families were the elite of society. And they were given these lands as a reward for services rendered to the queen or the king, to the crown, essentially. So all land belonged to the crown, and these landowners, these lords, etc., they were given lands to administer, and they would make money off it, and obviously they would pay a big tax to the crown. That's how it was. After the Industrial Revolution, the elite of society changed. Now the big money would come in from mass produced goods. So the industrialists became the new elite, and the landowners, they slowly faded into obscurity. Big owning big tracts of land became eventually a liability, because those peasants who were working, toiling away on your fields, they now migrated to the cities to work in the big, uh, what do you call them, factories. So that's what happened. So the whole, makeup of society changed, and then you had this the rise of corporations, the rise of quarter upon quarter profits, the quarterly statements, and all that. So society has changed very much. And then you had, people working in shifts, 8 hour, 8 hour, 8 hour shifts, 24 hours. You could have factories running, and so on. So it tremendously transformed society, and eventually it transformed the whole world. So that's, in a very brief answer, the gist of what happened. And you could, have a one semester course on the effects that this had on the world. Okay, Abhishek Samant says, what actually happened on the Nanda Devi mountain? Did the Americans lose a nuclear spy device there? The sanctuary is still out of bounds for regular hikers. So this is during the time of the Chinese invasion of Tibet. In the aftermath, so the Chinese invasion of Tibet happened in the 1950s. The invasion and annexation, which was helped by Mr. Nehru giving the Chinese soldiers rice so that they would not starve. Mr. Nehru was magnificent. Then you had the 1962 war and so on, and then there was to some extent, a certain amount of cooperation between India and the US. And the Americans wanted to spy on the Chinese activities in Tibet, in Chinese occupied Tibet. So they wanted to place some kind of devices. I'm not sure whether it was a telescope or whether it was some kind of other device, but it was an electronic device that needed power, and this had to be placed in the Himalayas, which is like the temperatures are frighteningly bad there. Like in winter, it's like -30, -35 in Ladakh and so on. So the temperatures really, really drop, and any instrumentation that you keep there will totally freeze and stop functioning in that sort of temperature. So you need a heating device. It needs to be heated and kept warm, otherwise it will not work. So one of the ways to do it is to use a small amount of plutonium. Okay, so a small amount of plutonium and a kind of spy device. I don't remember what kind of spy device it was, but it was a kind of device, probably to keep track of Chinese activities. So you had a plutonium device, and that was kept up on top of a mountain, and then the next spring when you go back there, the device is missing. And this region, this terrain is prone to avalanches and earthquakes as well. The Himalayas are still rising. There's massive tectonic activity happening there. You had a few years ago a massive earthquake in Nepal, and you have regular quakes, low intensity earthquakes that happen all the time in the Himalayas. So let's say a small tremor, which is like Richter, like 3.5, 4 on the Richter scale, that would happen every week, I would say. And you also have avalanches, which is this massive, amount of snow that fall down a mountain whenever there's a big noise, or for whatever reason, when the snow becomes unstable on the slopes. So it's quite likely that maybe there was a reasonably minor earthquake that dislodged the apparatus from the instrument from where it was kept, or maybe there was an avalanche that swept it away or something, or maybe there was some other thing that happened. Okay, so maybe that device is still somewhere out there, and it's still got that plutonium, which is heating it. And plutonium is, I would must tell you, it's an extremely toxic element. First of all, it doesn't occur naturally. Plutonium is something that you create in nuclear reactors as part of a nuclear reaction, and you typically have a breeder reactor that does that. Okay, I'll not go into the physics of it, but it's an artificially created element. It doesn't occur naturally on Earth, and it is extremely toxic. Even in very minute quantities, it is toxic. One of the worst case scenarios is somebody, well, I should not say it, but if you contaminate water with plutonium, it's going to cause a tremendous amount of deaths. So plutonium is very dangerous, very toxic. You typically keep it very well sealed, but if that device is indeed lost, then it makes sense that that region would be out of bounds for regular hikers. And some people have speculated that maybe the Indian government went and took this device so that it would examine it and figure out how it works and maybe take the plutonium or something like that. All theories. There is no real answer to what really happened. We don't know. But yeah, that is the deal. World of Facts says break down the current situation of Bangladesh Army versus Kuki National Army after looting a bank by the Kuki National Army in Bangladesh. Okay, I was not aware of the looting of a bank by the Kukis in Bangladesh, but well, that's something they typically would do. So this Kuki thing, okay, where's the map? Where is the map? We need to see the map because we're talking about something that is geographically related. So here is the map. Let's zoom in. Okay, we're talking about the far east of India. We're talking about Bangladesh. So these Kuki people, they historically were native to the region of Yunnan in present-day China. Okay, then they a few centuries ago they migrated into what is currently Burma. These Kukis, they don't speak the Burmese language, they don't practice the Burmese culture, they are not even Burmese. And now they're fighting a war against Burma, they're fighting a war against Bangladesh, and they're fighting a war against India. They're fighting a war against three nations to create a nation in Christ, a nation of Christ. So the Bangladesh army is fighting the Kukis, and the Burmese army is fighting the Kukis. And in India, we give Kukis Aadhaar cards. So that is the deal. And now I think it's very clear that the Kukis are kind of a big threat to the nation, and they aren't Indian. Okay, they may have acquired other cards or whatever. They may have they may be occupying land in India, but they aren't Indians. And just because somebody is born in India, they don't get Indian citizenship, and so on. So I'll not go into this. I've spoken about this at length many times. But yes, the Kukis are fighting Bangladesh, and the Bangladesh army will obviously take action against them. So that's what I can say in brief. I was not aware of the fact they've looted some bank. I don't keep track of what's happening on a day-to-day basis because it's kind of tedious. But I can tell you that this situation, this entire situation that we are seeing in the far east of India, in the Manipur, Mizoram region, it's not some local rebellion or local infiltration by some ragtag bunch of savage foreigners. It's a geopolitical matter, and there are bigger outside forces at play in this. By bigger outside forces, I'm talking about there are two or three nations that are more powerful and larger than India in the world. It's a couple of those that are involved in this. Okay. Chirag Avasti says, despite the US being a superpower, why couldn't they stop the rise of China? They, far from stopping the rise of China, the Americans have aided and abetted the rise of China. They have midwifed the birth of China as a potential great power, not a superpower, but a potential great power. So yeah, that's what the Americans have done. The Chinese were in danger of being nuked by the Soviet Union in 1969. After the Chinese fought the Soviets in the far east of Russia, of the USSR, along the Ussuri River. Would you like to see where it is? Let me bring it on the screen. Where's the map? Here is the map. So the far east of Russia is this. And then you have the Sakhalin Peninsula. Then you have Kamchatka, the island. Yes. And then you have this region. So somewhere around here is the Ussuri River. Where is this river? Let me find. This is the Amur River, but somewhere here is the Ussuri River that kind of, see, the Ussuri River. This is the Ussuri River. And this kind of defines the border of Russia and China today. Now, there's an island along this river, which will I be able to locate it? It will be somewhere around here. Okay, let's see, where is this island? Um, okay, it's somewhere around here. Okay, it may take some time for me to locate it. I will spare you the tedious search procedure. It's somewhere around here. There were massive clashes between the USSR and China along the lines of the India-China clashes along the disputed India-Tibet border, the undemarcated border. And the Soviets had decided to nuke China. The Americans came to know about this, and they said, if you guys nuke China, we're going to nuke you. So they threatened nuclear war. And that's how the Soviets kind of pulled back. And then the Americans had this detente with China during the presidency of Richard Nixon, when Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State. And that's how China slowly started opening up to the US. And China became the manufacturing hub. They would manufacture whatever the Americans needed at much lower rates than what the Americans could manufacture because their workers had to be paid more and so on. And as a result of this, over a few decades, there was a tremendous amount of technological transfer and all that. And the Chinese became this massive manufacturing power. And that's how they became an economic power. Otherwise, they were nowhere. So the Americans aided and abetted the rise of China. And it's only after the ascent of Xi Jinping to the presidency of China that China became this. They started acting up and behaving like a threat to the US. So yeah, the Americans actually did that, and they want to ensure they don't repeat that mistake with India. Okay. What next? Arjun Agarwal says, do you think the current sci-fi, science fiction, is becoming mostly dystopian? Absolutely. Absolutely. I read a lot. I have read a lot. I have been reading science fiction, especially uh, since I was a kid. Since I was what? 7, 8 years old. I've read a lot of science fiction. I've read a lot of science fiction from the 1940s, 50s, 60s. Okay. And if you read old science fiction, very quaint, weird science fiction, if you see that, it's a very utopian kind of literature, you know, uh, in which mankind goes out to the stars, humankind goes out to the stars, meets aliens, and sometimes there is war, sometimes there is cooperation, whatever. But it's overall very optimistic. And if you look at today's science fiction, it's all about dystopia. It's about a nuclear wasteland. It's about humanity has destroyed the earth and then something happens. It's all pessimistic, negative, dystopian. And it tells you the direction that Western society has taken, because this is all science fiction that's being written out of the West. Is there anybody in India that writes science fiction? No. No. Indians don't write science fiction. What a joke. They'll write God knows what, but they won't write science fiction because, okay, I'll not go there. So most of this science fiction it comes out of the West. Okay. And it reflects the mindset of today's society. So the science fiction that was written in the 1960s, 1950s, that reflected the worldview that the West had at that time. It was a very positive, optimistic worldview. Today, it's very negative. So yes, I agree with you, Arjun, that today's science fiction is becoming increasingly dystopian and negative and pessimistic, and that just represents the current mindset of the society in the West, which is not positive at all. If you talk about the US, they are no longer a nation that believes in exceptionalism. They are a nation that believes in mediocrity. The US believes in mediocrity. Look, see the kind of cultural manifestation that's coming out of the West. We don't have TikTok in India, thankfully. We banned that. Go to Instagram Reels or whatever and see the kind of culture they are showing today. It is cringeworthy. And the standards have dropped. The quality of life has dropped. Go to New York and see the quality of life there. There are people barbecuing rats on the streets and all. So yeah, as the US becomes more and more dystopian, science fiction is also becoming more and more dystopian. It's simply a reflection of the state of society in the West. Kostum says, your opinion on the Diego Garcia Island issue. I have made a whole video about this just a week or so ago. Check the video out. I have given my opinion in that. Okay. Anish says, have you watched the three body problem? I've seen one episode. I hardly get time to watch TV or watch anything on TV, but I have seen the first episode a couple of weeks back. I thought the first episode was fine. I haven't seen the rest of it, but I have read the books. So I think I've not read all the books. I think I've read the first book and some part of the second book, and then I ran out of time. The first book was great. The second book, probably, I'm sure it's great as well. So the books are great. It's by a Chinese author called Cixin Liu or something like that. Great books, but I'm not sure how good the series is. The Netflix series is. The first episode was not bad. I don't mind watching the second one, but after that, I don't know. So yeah. Sahil Sahu says, why was Burma separated from India and why didn't it join India after independence? Burma was, okay, map. Where's the map? Here is the map. I hope, my dear friends, you know where Burma is, Myanmar. It's now called Myanmar. It's this nation to the east of India, and it adjoins the Indian states of Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, and Arunachal Pradesh. So, this nation was part of the British Raj. It was part of British India. Okay? And culturally, it is very Indian. Myanmar, even Thailand is culturally very, very Indian. Well, the whole of Southeast Asia is culturally very Indian, all the way to Japan, actually, whether people realize it or not. So, Burma, Myanmar, it was part of British India. And in 1935, okay, mark my words, in 1935, the people of Myanmar, the people of Burma, voted to not dissociate from India. They wanted to remain part of India in 1935. And they actually voted to remain part of India. And despite that vote, the British separated Burma from India. And then, once such things happen, history takes its own course. I mean, Jinnah also was hoping, apparently, it is said, that this was just a temporary matter, the partition of India and Pakistan. Eventually, we'll all come back together. Once you take a certain step, history, the chains, the wheels of history will take you in a whole different direction. So Burma was partitioned forcibly from India by the British, 1935. Burma had voted to remain part of India, and the goddamn British partitioned Burma. Should not have been partitioned. The Burmese did not want to separate from India. The British did this. The British have done so much harm to the world. If there is a disaster that's going on in the far east of India, in Manipur, and in Burma as well, it is entirely a consequence of what the British did to this region. The root cause of the civil war in northern Burma and the root cause of the Kuki infiltration into Manipur is Britain, is the British invasion and occupation of this region. Every bad thing, once you go to the root of it, you will find the British at the root of it. So, yeah, there you have it. There you have it. Okay. Ah. Okay, I'll skip the name. What lessons, Austin Powers, is it? What lessons from rulers in the past can India learn today? What traits are necessary for future prime ministers and military leaders to adopt? First of all, one lesson that we should learn from the past, our past history, is that India should not be ruled by prime ministers. Go back to the times when India was at the peak of its game. Go back to the times in India's history, the past 3,000 years, let's say, when India was politically unified and India was tremendously prosperous and tremendously successful militarily. Did we have a prime minister ruling the country? No. We had an emperor ruling the country. And that emperor was typically a military leader. That's lesson number one. So was India a democratic country when India was at its peak multiple times in the past? Go back to the time of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in the Maratha Empire. Go back to the time of the Cholas when India conquered the whole of Southeast Asia. Go back to the time of Lalitaditya Muktapida when India conquered Central Asia. Go back to the time of the Gupta Empire when India conquered Bahlik and what is today's Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan region. Go back to the time of Kanishka, the Kushan, when India conquered Tibet and Xinjiang and had territories that touched the shores of the Caspian Sea, the Aral Sea. Go back to the Mauryan Empire when India reconquered, freed Gandhar from the Greeks and so on. Go back to these times when India was great. Did we have democracy? Did we have prime ministers? Did we have chief ministers? No, we had emperors. Lots of very straightforward lessons India can learn from history. Okay, and what traits are necessary for future leaders? Forget about prime ministers, leaders. National interest comes first. Be ruthless with enemies, and crush your enemies. See them driven before you, and so on. If you know what I mean. Okay. Abhijit, why don't you write sci-fi? I've never written fiction. Firstly, I've never written fiction. Secondly, I have no time these days. I have no time. But yeah, maybe I will write sci-fi one day. Maybe. Who knows? I may be good at it. I never knew that I was good at talking. I never knew that I was good at being online on a live stream and actually people would listen to me. I had no idea. So you're gonna try something before you know it works or not. So who knows, if I write sci-fi, I may be good or maybe I'll be terrible. Who knows? But unless I try it, I won't know. But there are other things I would like to do before I try my hand at sci-fi. I'd like to go back to actual science for a change. So we'll see about that. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion and I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, Xi Jinping ki ama. Xi Jinping. Okay. I saw many Western history channels saying that the British had not colonized India. Then the Dutch or the French or the Portuguese would have colonized India. Was it that easy, sir? I don't think it was that easy. The British were the most insidious of the lot. What the British succeeded in doing was that they succeeded in defeating the Maratha Empire that had already liberated most of India from Turkic occupation. So the Maratha Empire stretched from all the way in the south to all the way up to some parts of Afghanistan. They had genuinely liberated India from Turkic occupation, and the British destroyed that. They destroyed Hindavi Swarajya. Okay, so they were good at that. They did this everywhere. I don't think the Dutch or the French or the Portuguese were that good at defeating entrenched empires or civilization. It's not that easy. And the British were really good at that. And their successor state, the Americans, are also very good at that. So it wasn't that easy. I don't think if the British had, let's say the British failed at defeating the Maratha Empire, and let's say the Maratha Empire did not self-destruct and kick the British out, then I don't think the Dutch or the French or the Portuguese would have succeeded. The tussle was between the Maratha Empire and the British. And because of infighting, the Maratha Empire became weak. There were assassinations and so on among themselves. Read history. And because of infighting, the British were able to take advantage. Let's say there was no infighting in the Maratha Empire. Let's say it remained strong. And let's say it defeated the British. Then it would have been so strong that nobody else could have been able to defeat them. So these so-called history channels, they are giving you a very simplistic analysis and very rather fanciful analysis. I would not agree with this, with what they are saying. Okay. Okay, Giuseppe Di Fraia says, should I make my marriage into a business contract between my future wife and I? Because I think marriage is not love or sentiments, but business transactions in a marriage partnership. Look, the Western worldview, the Christian worldview, is that marriage is a social contract. Okay, and it's typically binding as long as the two parties are married, but it can dissolve in divorce. And typically in the West, marriage lasts between, I don't know, 6 months to 2 years to maybe 5 years, if you're lucky, 7, 10 years. But eventually people get divorced and there are like multiple marriages, or then some people choose not to marry and so on. So I'm not sure, Giuseppe Di Fraia, where you live, whether you're Indian or some from somewhere else, but it depends on the context of the society that you live in. Are people look, there are societies where people are extremely promiscuous, where extramarital affairs and adultery and infidelity is normal. Uh, Nations like, okay, I'll not take names because what's the point? Or if and there are some societies where you have, you still have fidelity, where most partners remain loyal to each other. There are there is a much lower incidence of these of infidelity, of cheating, and all that. So it depends. It depends. In India, also these days, I hear, I'm not seeing, but I hear that there is this, uh, there's this rise, especially in metropolitan areas, in urban areas, of people having multiple sexual partners and whatnot. If that becomes the norm, then obviously it makes sense for you to perhaps look at marriage from a realistic, pragmatic perspective, a geopolitical perspective, and not from an emotional perspective. But traditionally in India, marriage has been something that you have for life, and yeah, but it depends on the context. It entirely depends on the context and the environment that you're in. If you're in that sort of culture or society or country where it is, well, people get married and get divorced quickly, and then the person you marry will ask for half of your money, and you are legally obligated to pay that, then it makes sense to have a prenuptial agreement, or something like that. So it depends on the context, but you got to be careful, I would say. Today's the world has always been complicated, but you got to be careful. Okay. Swami Jain says, why were Indians bare-chested in the past, even in winter? Look, I'm sure that if you were living in Gandhar in winter, you would not be bare-chested, unless you were unless you were a sadhu who wanted to do tapasya. So even today in the Himalayas, you will see sadhus in in Ladakh and all, who will be wearing just a bit of cloth on their below the waist, and they can take the temperature, freezing temperatures. I don't know how. That is the incredible resilience of the human mind more than the body. But a standard person, a regular person living in Gandhar in October, in December, in February, I promise you they will not be bare chested. Okay. But if a person were living in, let's say, Tanjore, or let's say, so somewhere in the south, then even in winter, when the weather is mild, you can afford to be bare chested. So I don't think Indians were always bare chested. Okay. I don't think it was always the case. Depends on the climate, depends on where you're living, what latitude you're living in. If you're living below the Tropic of Cancer, even in winter, it's going to be reasonably pleasant. It won't be very, very cold. So you may enjoy the weather, and you may be able to remain, topless, bare chested. But if you were in, so that's what I mean. So there is no evidence that our ancestors were always bare chested, no matter the temperature. Doesn't make sense, right? But yeah, typically when you see Indian statues and carvings in temples uh, from before the Turkic invasion era, you typically see people who are bare-chested, male or female, because at least in summer and in spring and all, it was, the temperature was really reasonably hot, and it made sense not to wear that much clothing. So yeah, it's nuanced. History is not that black and white and simplistic. It's nuanced. You will see, for example, in carvings from the Gandhara region, present day Pakistan, no, Afghanistan, you will see in some cases people wearing shawls and all that as well. But you will also see bare-chested people. So it will depend on the season. All right. Um, Shakti Football says, will Indian football ever rise? The moment you pour money into a sport, that sport rises. Indian, I mean, I'm not sure if you remember, I've been watching cricket for a long time. Uh, I saw India play Pakistan live in the 1992 World Cup when I was a kid. And that's the first time India beat Pakistan in a World Cup. So I've seen the whole progress of Indian cricket. Indian cricketers used to be unfit and weak, bad fielders, bad runners, until the IPL happened. The IPL brought in tremendous amounts of money. And when you are being paid that much, you better be professional. And then you had all these coaches and trainers and medical sports medicine personnel coming in, and today you have the best athletes in cricket, tremendous fielders, tremendous runners, even domestic cricketers. The fitness standards have become world class, and the quality of the game has become world class, even among domestic cricket players in India. So money changes everything. The moment you have that sort of money that's poured into football, everything's going to change. So that's all it takes. Today you have somewhat Indian Football League or something. I'm not sure what it's called, and it happens a couple of times a year, a couple of months a year or something. But it's not at the same level. The moment you have proper money going into a football league, in a football league that lasts 6 to 8 months with like 3 or 4 months off season, that's when things change. So it's all about money. It's all about money, nothing else. Football will rise the moment somebody invests money into it. Okay. Okay, Lanzui Mavia Ahmar says, can you retell the Battle of Vienna, 1683, a turning point for Europe between the European Empire and the Ottoman Empire at their peak? And how is the date linked with the date of 9/11 attack, 2001? Okay, I'm not sure about the link with the 9/11 attack in 2001, but the Battle of Vienna was when, what's his name? Suleiman the Magnificent, was it? Born on November 6, whatever year. I know November 6, but I don't remember which year. So Suleiman the Magnificent, he is the guy who is considered to be the greatest of the Ottoman kings, sultans. And he was called the Kanuni, the lawgiver. He called himself the shadow of God on earth. And he made one great bid for, for continental domination. When he hammered at the gates of Vienna and seized the Christian world by its throat, and he besieged Vienna for several months, but he could not break through, and he had to eventually retreat. So that was the turning point. From that day onwards, the Ottoman Empire, you could say, that was the point at which it was stopped and then repelled. And the repulsion did not happen overnight. It took decades, it took centuries, but you could say perhaps that's the turning point, and that's where the slow decline eventually begins. So that's the Battle of Vienna, 1683. I don't remember which year it is. I'm assuming that what you're saying is right, 1683. So yeah, that was it. And I am not sure if there is any connection with 9/11, 2011, 2001. I'm not sure. I was not aware of this. So I cannot answer that part of the question. I don't know of any connection. But that's the Battle of Vienna. And the Turks were beaten back in that. Okay. Okay, Doc M says, talk about Iran retaliation possibilities and Israel's response further. Well, now you're asking me to talk about all kinds of potential scenarios. Okay, let's take a look at the map, because we need the map for this. So we know that Israel has attacked just a few days ago the Iranian consulate in Damascus. So Israel is this nation on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, and Damascus is over here, the capital of Syria. Would you like to see the place where this attack happened? I can actually show it to you. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Let's use the satellite image. Okay, here you have satellite imagery. And this attack happened. Let me try and zoom in and see if I can find the place. Okay. So this is the embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the embassy of Canada. And there's a building in between, which is the Iranian consulate. This building that is sandwiched between the two embassies, Canada and Iran, that is the Iranian consulate that was bombed. Apparently, 6 missiles were launched from F-35 fighter planes, Israeli fighter planes. Okay? Now the question is, what does Iran do about this? And some people will say that if it's a diplomatic building, why were there military personnel in that? Why were there military personnel in a diplomatic building? Let me explain something to you, my friends. Every embassy has military personnel. They're called military attaches or defense attaches. And every embassy also has intelligence personnel, spies, who are given some diplomatic title. This is common practice. You will have serving military personnel on diplomatic deputation in embassies and consulates. There is nothing wrong or illegal about that. But I'm not saying that Israel has done something terribly bad. Even the Iranians have attacked embassies and all in the past. So there's no right or wrong in this. It's just the way the world works. Now, what does Iran do about this? If Iran does nothing, then Iran kind of loses credibility, and then its enemies will fear it less. So Iran will have to do something. What does Iran do? Well, Iran can activate various proxies. Iran's proxies exist in Yemen, the Ansar Allah faction, the Houthis. Iran's proxies are all across Iraq. Iraq is what? More than 50% Shia. Definitely more than 40% Shia, probably more than 50% Shia. And Iran is entirely Shia. So Iran has plenty of allies in Iraq. Iran has allies in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, which is the Hezbollah. Iran has allies in Hamas, and Iran has allies in Syria as well. Syria, the regime of Mr. Al-Assad, is allied with Iran and with Russia. So Iran has lots of proxies it can activate. If it activates proxies in Iraq, that's going to be a problem for the American troops who are occupying Iraq. Iraq is under US occupation. In case you are not aware, the Iraqis want the Americans to leave, but the Americans are saying, no, we will not leave. Then if there is an activation of Iranian proxies in Syria, well, you should know that the eastern part of Syria is under US occupation. Okay, the Americans have troops in the eastern corner of Syria. It could be a problem for those troops if Iran activates its proxies in Syria. If Iran activates Hezbollah and turns Israel's northern border into a hot border, it's again a problem for Israel. And then Iran can also activate the Houthis to strike at Israeli or American shipping vessels in the Gulf of Aden. And India, the Indian Navy is currently patrolling this region, but the Indian Navy's operations are typically aimed at controlling Somalian pirates. It is not aimed at the Houthis. And the Houthis have also not taken any kind of hostile action against the Indian Navy. So there's a lot going on here. But if Iran wants to maintain credibility, it will have to perhaps launch a direct strike at Israel, which could possibly mean some kind of missile strike at various positions within Israel. There are plenty of strategic targets from an Iranian perspective within Israel. So they could launch missile strikes, maybe cruise missiles, maybe ballistic missiles. I'm just imagining, okay, a possible scenario, a hypothetical scenario. They could even launch drone swarms at Israel from within perhaps Syria, from perhaps within Iraq or somewhere else, or even from Lebanon, who knows? So plenty of possibilities exist. The important thing is that if Iran does not respond, if Iran does not retaliate, then it will lose credibility. So that is a deal. That's a deal. Okay. Okay, now Mugiwara says, if World War II did not happen, would we be still ruled by the British? Probably not. The Americans would have found a way to rule the world because the US is just too large. It's too vast. It has too many resources, and they would have anyhow found a way to elbow the British out. So see, look, we're talking about alternate history here. Lots of things could have happened, but most likely it just makes sense that a nation that occupies essentially an entire continent, at least half of a continent, the better half, they would find a way to rule the world. So I don't know. I guess the Americans would have found a way to take over. Okay. Once again, Xi Jinping Gamma. Do you agree with the Western idea of equality, where woman and a man should be treated equally? I believe that even if a woman slaps a man and she's wrong, a man should not slap back. Look, you can believe whatever you want. Everybody can believe whatever they want. I believe in people getting equality of opportunity and equality of rights, and also perhaps equality of duties. So today, in today's world, physical strength doesn't matter that much because we have technology where you can be the weakest person physically, but you can wield enormous power. Look at us humans. We are the weakest physically of all the apes. Our chimpanzee cousins who are smaller than us in stature, they are way stronger than us physically. The gorilla, another of our relatives, very close relatives, is humongously powerful physically compared to a human. The orangutan, the gibbon, all these various apes, tailless monkeys, they're all physically stronger than us. And yet, we are the dominant species because of the intelligence. So physical strength no longer matters. So when it comes to genders, uh, obviously the males in the human species are more powerfully built. The females are not, but today that doesn't matter. So I believe that every member of society should have should have equality of opportunity and equal laws. There should be no discrimination based on gender or whatever, but you cannot have equality of outcome. Okay, equality of opportunity, and then may the best win. So it should be equality of opportunity and a merit based system. Now whether a woman slaps a man and she's wrong, then the man should not slap back. Well, I'm not getting into that kind of thing. Nobody should slap anybody. That's my point. Okay, but I believe that everybody should get the same opportunities, and everybody should be governed by the same laws, irrespective of their gender. I think that's how it should be, and I think that's where India is today, isn't it? Maybe women are more privileged, perhaps, than men in India today, according to the laws. Okay, now geopolitical Dubey says, what if the split part of East Africa slams southern India? Will it cause another mountain range like the Himalayas? Okay, let me put the map on the screen. The split part of East Africa. Not sure which split part it is. Let's say Madagascar. Okay, Madagascar is this gigantic island over here. Let us say for some reason, because of some tectonic activity, Madagascar slams into southern India. So, what do you mean by slamming? We have to first define slamming. India broke away, the Indian subcontinent broke away from Africa more than 100 million years ago. And it started colliding with Eurasia about 50 to 40 million years ago. And it is still colliding. So, in geological terms, a collision takes something between 10 to 50 million years. That's what we call slamming in geology. Okay, so a collision in geology, in the sense of geology, takes between 10 to 50 million years. So for this part of East Africa to slam into southern India, we will have to wait for about 10 to 50 million years. I'm sure I'll not be around by the time. But yeah, if that happens, it will certainly cause another mountain range to emerge, similar to the Himalayas. For sure, it will. Okay. Hitansh Sharma says, when space travel and human settlement on Mars happens successfully, how will land division happen on the moon or Mars between countries? Good question. You're going to have eventually, if there is a successful settlement of humans on the moon, on Mars, very soon people are going to start claiming territories. So let's say the US sends a bunch of humans to the moon, which will happen soon, and then they set up a lunar base. Then the Indians do that. India will send by 2020, 2035, 2040, thereabouts, humans on the moon. India will also set up a base on the moon. The Chinese, by that time, will do that. The Russians want to do it. So let's say by 2050, okay, by 2050, there is an American base on the moon. There is an Indian base on the moon, a Chinese base, and a Russian base. So initially, there's going to be significant geographical distance between these bases, and these will be small bases. Maybe one base will have 5 to 10 people at a given point in time. But by 2100, these bases will expand become like towns or cities, and then nations will start claiming territories. And the same thing will happen on Mars. Okay, this is our sovereign territory, nobody comes here. That sort of thing. And eventually, once these settlements become self sustaining in the future, and they don't have to rely on Earth for supplies, they will probably declare independence from Earth and they will set up their own nations. That may also happen. So it's an organic process. It's something that happens over time, organically, spontaneously. That's what history tells us. So initially, Australia was a colony of England. It is still technically under the British Crown, but it's a separate nation today. The United States started as a colony of England and it declared independence. It fought a war of independence against the British because the British wanted to tax them 2%. What is the income tax in the US today? It's more than 40% in some cases, and the people are happy with that. But they fought a war of independence for 2% tax. That's so the wolves have turned into sheep essentially. Anyhow, that's a different story. So that's how it happens organically, spontaneously. Eventually, that sort of thing will happen. Okay. All right. What else do we have? Geopolitical says, do you think India and China will have a Cold War 2.0? We are in a Cold War 2. The Cold War 2.0 is between one part of the world and another part of the world. It's between the Western-led world, the Western world, which is led by the US, and the Eastern world, which is an amalgam of China and Russia, Iran, Syria, all these nations. There is a Cold War that's already happening, Cold War 2.0. It's not between India and China. It's between China, Russia, and the West. Iran is part of China, Russia, and so is Syria, and so are some other nations like North Korea and so on. So that's the new Cold War, the Cold War 2.0. And when it comes to India and China, we are in a state of Cold War. We're not the best of friends. We're not even bad friends. We're not friends at all. It's pretty hostile. So yeah, it's a Cold War. But one hopes it doesn't become a hot war because that would be bad for either country. Okay. Vaibhav Shukla says, what do you think of India taking back Aksai chain as hard power or using military as the only option? Unlike POK, where a lot of civil war will lead it to break apart. You know what? I am of the opinion that India should right now forget about taking back territories we have lost. Focus on building India's economic power and hard power. Focus on that for the next 10, 20 years. Forget about all these territories that have gone. The stronger you get, the easier it becomes to get these territories back. When you are so strong that nobody can challenge you, those territories will automatically fall back into your lap. So let us forget about taking this or that territory back. Focus on the hard thing, which is to grow India's economy. And as you grow India's economy, India's hard power will also grow automatically. That's what India has to do. Without hard power, there is no taking back POK or Aksai Chin or whatever. So let's say you are up against a sumo wrestler who is 300 kilos and you weigh 75 kilos. And you're thinking about taking something he has taken from you. First, try and build some muscle, will you? It's going to take some time to do that. You're going to have to do a lot of hard lifting day after day at the gym. So focus on that. Then we'll talk about taking things back. And once that guy is 300 kilos, but you have become 400 kilos, hard muscle, not fat, then that guy will automatically give it back to you. Le lo bhai. So that's what India has to do. Let's forget about taking this or that back. When it comes to Pakistan, that nation will break up automatically. It's a matter of time. I call it a temporary nation there's a good reason for calling it a temporary nation. It's an artificial nation which is temporary in nature. China is a different beast. So let's first rise to a comparable level with China. Understand China is way stronger than India today. Understand that China's economy is 5 times that of India. And China's hard power is about 3.5 times that of India. So let's build our power first. I'm really tired of this talk about taking back POK and Aksai and all that. It will happen, but it takes time. It's not going to happen next week or next month. Forget about that. Focus on the basics first. Okay. uh, Sarvagya Sharma says, what language do you think will be the best to replace English in Bharat? Only one language can is in there's only one language that can claim the status of India's civilizational language throughout history, and that is Sanskrit. I hope that one day everybody in India will be speaking Sanskrit as the official national civilizational language. Only one language can claim that status. Only Sanskrit, no other language. So that is the best language and the only language that can be used to replace English as the official civilizational language in Bharat. Okay. Akhilesh says, if you could travel back in time with a time machine, what message would you convey to three different historical leaders, and why? If I had access to a time machine, I would never go back in time. Because you go back in time, you interfere with causality, with the causal structure of the universe. And even the air that you breathe can cause changes, and it can end up messing up the future timeline of the world. You don't want to do that. I would, if I had a time machine, I would go to the future. I'll go and try and see what the future is like. So if you go to the future from the past, you're not messing with the causal structure of the universe. Okay? And then you can come back and understand that, okay, this is what may happen, what has happened in the future. So let's try and re-engineer today's world, and take actions that will maybe not, that will ensure that that bad scenario doesn't happen, and maybe something else happens. So if I had a time machine, I would go to the future, maybe 20 years in the future, then maybe 50 years in the future, maybe then 100 years in the future, and then maybe 1,000 years in the future, to understand what the future is like, so that I can come back here and then perhaps take some actions that can bring about a different future, maybe a better future. That's what I would do. I would not go back to the past. Okay. Okay. Khan Rafael Ali says, if China were to attack both POK and Jammu and Kashmir simultaneously, is there a hypothetical possibility for a military alliance to occur between India and Pakistan backed by US blessings? Well. That's It's a very interesting scenario that you bring about, Ali. So, if China were to attack both POK and Jammu and Kashmir simultaneously, why would China do that? China already has access to POK. They are building that so-called CPEC infrastructure through POK, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is kind of defunct, but they were building something there. There was the presence of Chinese troops of a certain amount, a certain level in POK. So the Chinese already have access to POK. Uh, but let's say they attack POK and Jammu and Kashmir simultaneously. Uh, I don't think there is a possibility of any kind of alliance between India and Pakistan. And US blessings, it's always best not to be blessed by the US, it's always best. Um, so what I can say is that this scenario is first of all not feasible from the perspective of the logic of strategy, because China and Pakistan, they kind of align strategically vis-a-vis India. Pakistan today is very much firmly back in the US saddle, let's say, but there is some synergy between Pakistan and China when it comes to the relationship with India. So I don't see the Chinese ever attacking POK. They may attack Jammu and Kashmir. That may happen, but POK simply can't happen. Um, so, and even if it happens, I don't see India and Pakistan fighting together. The DNA of the two militaries is so different. They can't fight together, especially the Pakistan military. They're just conditioned to see India as the enemy no matter what happens. So it is unlikely. This scenario is unlikely. And secondly, the India and Pakistan coming together with US blessings, that is also extremely unlikely. I don't see that happening in this hypothetical scenario. Okay, Manish Kashyap says the empire of Chakravarti Samrat Vikramaditya Parmar of Avantika real or just a popularized myth? Was his empire bigger and stronger than the Mauryan Empire and versus Julius Caesar? Uh, Vikramaditya Parmar. There were so many Vikramadityas that I'm not sure which one this one is. This is, but I don't think any empire of Vikramaditya was greater than that of the Mauryan Empire. So the Mauryan Empire, it essentially had all of India unified politically. And when I'm talking about India, I'm talking about Gandhar as well. So present day Pakistan, present day Afghanistan, up to the border of Tajikistan, and much of the rest of India. Very few empires have eclipsed that in terms of area under control. Probably Kanishka had a greater empire, greater extent of empire because his empire touched the Aral Sea and the Caspian Sea as well as it included Tibet and Xinjiang. And obviously, the Chola Empire included the whole of Southeast Asia. Yeah, so that sort of thing. So I think the Mauryan Empire was probably greater. And when it comes to Julius Caesar, let's go to the map. So Caesar, Kaiser, Julius Kaiser. He was from Italy. He conquered the whole of France today. He conquered, let's uh, let's call it southern Germany, what is today Switzerland. He conducted a tremendous genocide of the Celtic people in France, in Switzerland. He conquered Iberia, which is present day Spain, much of it. He conquered parts of the British Islands. Then he also conquered Greece, uh, and he also conquered Egypt. So that's quite a reasonably large empire. The Cholas conquered all of Southeast Asia up to the Philippines. So that is kind of similar, if not larger than the Roman Empire. When it comes to the Mauryans, they conquered the whole of the subcontinent, more or less. When it comes to the Guptas, under Kumaragupta, I think they conquered Bahalik, which is all the way to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and they also had regions up to Sri Lanka. So all these empires had different sizes and shapes and characteristics. Uh, so yeah, that's about it. But I'm not sure about Vikramaditya Parmar of Avantika, how large or small his empire was. I'm not very can't remember exactly when this happened and how large it was. So not sure if I can answer the question. But I hope I have given reasonably varied context. Okay, let's see what else we have. Geopolitical says, what's the relation between the Celtic goddess Danu and the Rigvedic Danu? Same goddess. Both are river goddesses. There's a Balinese goddess in Bali today. They still pray to a goddess called Danu in Bali, in Indonesia. And that Danu is also a river goddess. Okay. So in the Rig Veda, there was this lady called Danu. She's a goddess, and she was the mother of a large number of sons, and they were called the Danavas. And the Danavas were kind of nasty, evil people. They were opposed to the gods, let's say. So it is kind of asuras versus suras, that sort of devas versus asuras kind of thing. And there was a fight between the devas and the Danavas, and the Danavas were defeated and they were expelled out of Aryavarth, out of India. And then they are expelled and their story ends. But does it? So that is what we know from the Rig Veda, that they were defeated. Now, if you look, so Danu was this river goddess. Okay, she was a river goddess. Now, if you go to so for the longest time, what is today called Central Asia was once called Scythia. The Shaka people used to live there. The Shakas were Indian origin people. The Western historians will call them Iranian people, but they were Indian origin people, and they eventually they ruled Central Asia for several thousand years. And about 2,000 years before today, they re-entered India as invaders and conquerors, and they re-assimilated with the Indian population. That's the Scythian invasion of India, and their kings were eventually called the Mahakshatrapas, the great satraps, the northern satraps and the western satraps. The western satraps were based in Gujarat and they controlled the great ports that were the gateway of India for the Western world, for trade with Rome and Egypt and all that. And they were also the lords and protectors of the great Jyotirlinga at Somnath, these Indo-Scythian kings. So For the longest time, Central Asia was called Scythia, and the Scythian word for water was Danu. Okay, the Scythian word for water was Danu. Now there's a bunch of rivers in Europe. We know there is a massive war going on in Ukraine. The capital of Ukraine is Kiev. Yes, Kiev. So this river, the city Kiev, is sitting astride a river, and that river is the Dnieper. Dnieper. And then there is a Dniester river in the east. Let us find the Dniester river. Okay, over here, Moldova. Here you have a Dniester. So you have a Dniester and a Dnieper. So the Dnieper is the Danu Apara, and the Dniester is the Danu Astara or something like that. So the upper Danu and the lower Danu. Then you have the Danube, which is another great river in Europe, which is also named after Danu. Then you have the Rodanu. The Rodanu is now called the Rhone. The city of Geneva, the river that goes through it, is called the Rhone, Rhone. Historically, it was called the Rodanu. So there's a whole bunch of rivers in Europe. The Dnieper, the Dniester, the Dvina, Dunajec, the Danube, the Rodanu, and so on and so forth. A whole bunch of rivers across Europe that is named after Danu, which kind of traces the westward migration of the Danava people. And they end up in Ireland. And the ancient people of Ireland, the mythological ancestors of the Irish people, were called the Tuatha de Danann, the peoples of the goddess Danu. And that goddess Danu, the Irish goddess Danu, was also a river goddess. And there you have it. That's the relation. It's the same goddess. No matter what these historians say, it is the same goddess. And the same goddess is still worshipped in Indonesia, again called Danu. All right, that is about that. Okay, Pratik Vora says, why is the international tourist inflow in India very low when we are the longest continuously existing civilization with so many places to explore and history, culture, food, etc.? I think Bangkok in 1 year gets more tourists than the whole of India. Bangkok, our neighboring country, Thailand, right next door. You can fly from Kolkata to Bangkok in less than 2 hours, I'm sure, and so on. So why is that so? Look, we may have the greatest culture, the oldest history, and so on, but if we don't make of tourists feel welcome, they won't come. How do you make tourists feel welcome? They should have a smooth process of entering the country, no long lines for stamping visa or whatever. Okay, a visa process has to be there. But when you enter India for immigration, let's say through a cruise ship, the process should be smooth. It should take 5 minutes, not 2 hours in the heat, standing under the sun. Yeah. Then once you are inside India, once you have crossed the immigration threshold, you should have good infrastructure. Let's say you want to visit Ajanta Caves or Ellora Caves, very interesting place, historical place. You want to go there. How do you get there? If I was a tourist, I would want to go by plane. I want to take a plane journey, get off there, get on a taxi, and be there in 5 minutes, 10 hours, half an hour, 10 minutes, half an hour. I don't want to take a 5-hour road journey. And once I reach there isn't good infrastructure. I don't have a good hotel there, no air conditioning, no good restaurants, no good toilet facilities, and so on. I don't want to have to deal with corrupt officials. I don't want to have to deal with bad roads, bad traffic, and so on. So there is a lack of quality infrastructure in India. Things are improving, but we are not there right now. Do you understand? So if you are a tourist, you want a smooth experience, you want a pleasant experience. You get that in Thailand, in Bangkok, you get that in Turkey, you get that in Greece. Even the Chinese are rolling out the red carpet. You get that in Japan. In India, it's still not there. India is a potential tourism superpower. But for that, we will have to invest in quality infrastructure and in making tourists feel really welcome. It's not there. It's not there right now. That's the problem. Tourism can contribute a tremendous amount to India's GDP, but that money will not go into the pockets of politicians. It will go straight into the public's coffers. It will help the local shops, local restaurants, local hotels. It won't help the local politicians. So that's a problem. So that is the reason. Tourists don't typically have a great experience in India. In some parts of India, the experience is great, but in most parts, it's not that great. Especially if you're interested in visiting historical sites and all. The maintenance of the historical sites is terrible, unless it is a Mughal or monument like Taj Mahal, right? And there may be restrictions in some places about partying or nightlife or whatever. In some states of India, you can't drink alcohol. Well, tourists want to enjoy everything they enjoy in other places, and so on. So there are so many issues right now, which are kind of frustrating. India should do so much more. It will take time. One has to be patient. But yeah, that's the reason why India is still not that great when it comes to leveraging its tourism potential. Okay. Okay, what do we have? What else do we have? Shadow says, can we make it so that we only give visa free to those who have visa free for us? So there are a number of countries that offer us either visa on arrival or just visa free entry. For example, you want to go to Iran, let's say, for whatever reason, you don't have to apply for a visa. You go there, and then once you go there with a passport, they will see your passport and they'll stamp a visa there, and you just enter the country. You don't have to go through a visa application process. Uh, when it comes to Thailand, same thing. You go to whatever place in Thailand, and you will get a visa on entry stamp once you reach the airport or whatever port of entry it is. If you want to go to the US, if you want to go to the European Union nations, there's a long, tedious visa procedure, which is actually quite humiliating. So the question is, should we have reciprocity? The nations that give us visa-free entry, we give them visa-free entry. In some cases, they will have online e-visas, which is a very straightforward process. For those nations, we give them also the same sort of facility, online e-visa, electronic visa. And for those nations that make us go through this tedious procedure, we also make them go through a tedious procedure. Well, how about that? I think we have something like that. We don't offer every nation a visa-free access or visa on arrival access. American citizens who are used to getting visa-free access almost everywhere, they complain that in India we have to go through the visa procedure. Well, what do you expect? It's much easier than what you make Indian citizens go through when they want to visit the US. So I think there has to be some amount of reciprocity. But in case we want certain nations to invest in India and we want to attract their business, we should maybe give them preferential treatment, even though they may not give us the same thing. So it is all about putting our interests first. Let's say X nation requires Indians to go through the visa procedure and apply for a visa and go to the embassy and spend some time and waste some time to get a visa. But that nation has a lot of money, and we want to attract that money into India. We want them to invest in India. In that case, despite them doing this to us, we may perhaps want to consider giving them visa free or visa on arrival facilities so that we can attract their investment and they can make it easy. We can make it easy for them to invest in India. So it's all about seeing who can offer us what, and that's how it goes. So in these matters, we have to be unemotional. Just look at it rationally, logically. Okay. Let's see what else we have. Vaishnavi says, why have Vedic gods and goddesses lost their relevance? Now we now worship Shiva, Vishnu, and other gods, and invoke those Vedic gods at times of rituals, but not actively pray to them. My thoughts. First of all, Lord Shiva is a Vedic god. The name has changed. We call him Lord. We call him Shiv today, or Mahadev, or Mahesh. But we also call him Rudra. We these days nobody uses the term Rudra for him. In the Rig Veda, he is called Rudra. Today we call him Shiva. So it's the same God. It's a Vedic God. Shiva is the oldest of the gods. Um, he's the only truly supernatural God in Hinduism. You know, there is you must have, I hope you know about the Nasadiya Sukta in the Rig Veda, the creation hymn, in which is, you know what it says? That in the beginning there was nothing but darkness, and darkness enveloped in darkness, and nothing was created. And then everything appeared out of that darkness, and the universe was created, or something along those lines. And even the gods, the Vedic gods, are part of the universe. They were created with the universe. So who created them? And the creator, does he know who created them all, or does he himself not know? So it's a very agnostic kind of creation hymn that we have in Hinduism. It says that even these Vedic gods came with the universe. It's a package deal. Once the universe was created, these gods came with the universe. So even they were born with the birth of the universe. So what came before that? Who created the universe? Who created all of this? And does he know, or does he also not know what's the origin of creation? So that's the other thing. And the only truly supernatural God is Shiva, because he is supposed to be the timeless God, the God that existed before the universe and will exist after this universe dies. Because the universe is a life cycle. It's kind of a multiverse cosmology that we have, a cyclical universe kind of thing, and multiple universes and all. And Shiva is the god who's beyond death and time. Rudra. So first of all, Rudra is probably the oldest and most primordial god. There are some other gods that have kind of gone out of relevance. No one remembers them. We talk about Indra and all these gods. Does anybody remember Dyoshpitru? Nobody remembers Dyoshpitru, the father of Indra, the father of all the gods. But once again, Dyoshpitru himself was a part of the universe. So he came with the package deal after the creation of the universe. Um, but so Indian history is so old that even gods have kind of fallen into the background. So, like you rightfully say, nobody prays to Indra today. There was a time when Indra was well, the god of war, the god of victory, the first god you would pray to before you went into battle, and so on. Then he becomes the god of rain, and today he becomes some kind of, well, he has become a caricature. He is now looked upon as kind of a caricature of what he used to be. So gods also kind of fall out of favor. That's how old Indian history is, thousands and thousands of years. So new gods take precedence. Old gods kind of fade into the background, but they are still kind of around there. And today in our rituals and Vedic rituals and all, we still invoke the old gods. And that's how it is. So sometimes the new gods have the characteristics of the old gods and so on. So it's quite complex, and this all is a very good indicator of how old Indian history is. Evolution, cultural evolution, religious evolution. But the oldest god is Shiva, and he is still very much relevant. He used to be called Rudra. Om Bhagavate, Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. That's how the Rudri part goes, right? The Rudri part. It's part of the Yajurveda. I don't remember which Veda, but it starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya, which is Shiva. But they used to call him Rudra back in the day, a few thousand years ago. Okay. M. Reddy says, how did Afghanistan become an Islamic country? What was it like there before becoming Islamic? Afghanistan is Gandhar, the northwestern part of historical India. The land, the province from which Gandhari, the Queen Gandhari, originated, and her brother Shakuni. So it was very much Indian for the longest period in history. But then things changed. You had the Turkic invasions, and the first part of India to fall to the Turkic invasions was northwestern India, which is Afghanistan. So before Afghanistan was Islamic, there was this Buddhist period, and before the Buddhist period, there was obviously the Vedic period. So that's how it was. All of Central Asia was Hindu. When the Scythians ruled Central Asia, so at that time, and before the Scythians, it was all Hindu land. You have very ancient ruins of Hindu temples. which then have been converted into something else, into a later foreign religion. So Afghanistan, the process of Afghanistan becoming Islamic begins about 1,000 years before today. The Ghoris, the Ghoris were a Buddhist dynasty. The Ghoris were a Buddhist dynasty. And then you know what happened. So, to put it very simply, Afghanistan was the original Kashmir. What happened to Kashmir in the past 300 years, 400 years, is what first happened to Afghanistan. Exactly the same thing. Today, if you go to Afghanistan, there's this ethnic cocktail, a mix of ethnicities. The predominant ethnicity is the Pashtuns. And then you have the Uzbeks and the Hazaras and the Tajiks and the various other ethnicities. The Tajiks, you could say, are the natives to some extent, more in Tajikistan. The Pashtuns are the true native of Afghanistan. The Uzbeks and the whatever else, those are Turkic invaders who then were settled in Afghanistan. So they're not really Afghans, actually. But today, obviously, they've been living in Afghanistan for several hundred years. So, yeah. And they've all kind of intermingled and intermixed today. So, yeah, they're all Afghans today. But the true natives of Afghanistan are the Pashtuns, and so on. Long process, standard process of how it happens. But yeah, you could say that Afghanistan is the first Kashmir, and then the same thing happened to Kashmir. Okay. Okay, what else? Okay, Babar Kha Dabar says, why is there a global rise of the right wing? Is it because of the hypocrisy of the left, or is there more to it? Okay, let me think about it. Where is there a global rise of the right wing? In India, there's no right wing. If you think the BJP is right wing, that's not quite true. The BJP is kind of a centrist party. It's not a right wing party. If it was a right wing party, India would have been declared a Hindu nation by today. The BJP is more of a centrist party. Okay, it's not left wing by any means. It's not right wing also. It's kind of doing a balancing act. It is still following the Indian constitution and secularism and all that, and much more. So there is no, okay, people in India identify the BJP as a right wing party, but they're not quite correct in that. Lots of people in India call themselves right wingers. They vote for the BJP, which is good, but and that is kind of a reaction to centuries of oppression, and also a reaction to all the uh, policies of the Indian government since 1947, all the way to 2014. And then there was a big reaction to that. So it's a natural reaction. It's going to happen. Now, is there a global rise of the right wing? Let's see. Is there a rise of the right wing in the UK? Not quite. Is there a rise of the right wing in, let's say, France? Well, Monsieur Macron is not a right winger, he's kind of a lefty. Is there a rise of the right wing in Germany? No, 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 no. The rise of the right wing in Germany means marching boots again. Okay, so that is not going to happen. Is there a rise of the right wing in the US? Well, you've got the lefties in power today. Mr. Biden is a lefty, is a Democrat. The Republicans are not in power. And let's see if they manage to return to power in this year's election. We don't know. We'll see about that. So I'm not sure there is a global rise of the right wing. There is certainly a reaction to all the lefty policies that are being followed across the European Union and the Western world, which is becoming more and more left dominated. There's going to be some reaction, but they aren't really succeeding in coming to power as such. There's a reaction that's visible. But who's dominating? Who's in power? Who's running the government? Mostly it's the left wing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Pradyumna Nittala says, "What's the history of the British Indian Ocean Territory? How did it end up in the hands of the British and the Americans? Was it owned by the Cholas?" Look, I have a whole video that came out just about a week or so ago about this matter, but let me just give you a brief recap. This British Indian Ocean Territory, okay, it's south of India in the Indian Ocean region. Okay, one thing I have to clarify. I get a lot of comments these days. So I had this video in which I am in a hotel room and I show the view outside of the hotel room. There's the sea there. I say it's the Indian Ocean. And most people will understand that I was in Mumbai at the time. So people were correcting me in the comments. No, it's not the Indian Ocean, it's the Arabian Sea. It really annoyed me. And I don't blame those people for those comments. I blame their geography teachers. The so-called Arabian Sea is part of the Indian Ocean. The Gulf of Aden is part of the Indian Ocean. Okay? The Mozambique Channel between Madagascar and Africa is part of the Indian Ocean. The Lakshadweep Sea is part of the Indian Ocean. The Bay of Bengal is part of the Indian Ocean. The Andaman Sea is part of the Indian Ocean. What sort of geography are these people teaching you if you think that the Arabian Sea is not part of the Indian Ocean? It is so annoying to see the low standards of India's geography teachers who have brainwashed an entire generations of kids into thinking that the Arabian Sea is not part of the Indian Ocean. It's just it's beyond belief that this is what is being taught. Anyhow, coming back to your question. Okay, this so we have the Lakshadweep Islands here. Okay, southwest of India in the Indian Ocean. South of the Lakshadweep, you have the Maldives, and south of the Maldives, you have the British Indian Ocean Territory. Now, this British Indian Ocean Territory used to be administered from Mauritius. And in 1965, before the British gave independence to the Mauritius, they detached the British Indian Ocean Territory from the Mauritius in contravention of United Nations agreements. And then they handed over this to the US. Okay? So I'm not sure if the Cholas ruled it. Probably not, but it was known to ancient Indians. The Maldives and the Lakshadweep Islands were settled by ancient Indians about 3,000 or so years ago. And in the past 700, 800 years, the Maldives became Islamized. Before that, it was Hinduism and Buddhism there. And sometimes people would get stranded on these islands in the Chagos archipelago, and then they would have to be rescued in a few months. So Indians knew about this territory, but we did not occupy this territory. And so the British handed over this base, Diego Garcia, to the Americans in 1973. So the Americans supported the Pakistanis in the 1971 war, when the Pakistanis were conducting a genocide of mostly Hindus in East Pakistan. And India had to respond to Pakistani first strikes, Air Force strikes on Indian territory, and that's how the war begins, 1971. And the British and the Americans sent two aircraft carrier task forces in the Bay of Bengal to bully India, to intimidate India, and to force India into not attacking Pakistan. And they would have succeeded, but the Russians sent a fleet of nuclear submarines to face off against the British and the Americans. And the British and the Americans had to back off. So because of this Russian action, India was able to go ahead with the war and liberate Bangladesh and take Dhaka and give Bangladesh freedom from Pakistan. So that made it very clear in 1971 to America that they needed a permanent base in this region from which they could project power. So 2 years later, they acquired this territory, Diego Garcia, and it technically should belong to the Maldives, to Mauritius. The UN has made it amply clear that Britain does not have any sovereignty over this, but the British refused to give it away, to give it back to the rightful owner, which is Mauritius. So on the one hand, they talk about Russia occupying parts of Ukraine, and they want India to support Ukraine in this. On the other hand, the British and the Americans are occupying territory that belongs to Mauritius. The UN and the International Court of Justice, etc., have made it very clear that the UK has no sovereignty over these islands, and they have to return it immediately, but they are not doing it. Absolute double standards and hypocrisy. So that is the deal with the so-called British Indian Ocean Territory, right? Okay. Okay, let's try and see something different. Some of the questions. Let us see. Okay, let's see this question by Bobby. Good to see Bobby after a long time. Hope you're doing well. So magically, India dropped from fifth in top world cuisines to 11th in 1 year span, according to Taste Atlas. Swap with China. China. Did did Indian cuisine change drastically? Who paid who? Look, these indexes, indices, rankings, and all, they are very subjective. It's all based on opinions of a small number of people who we don't know who they are. So-called experts, but who are these experts? What are the methodology by which you did the rankings? How do you determine something as subjective as culinary taste and quality? Not sure. So yeah, magically, I was not even aware of this particular Taste Atlas ranking. But okay, so we've dropped from fifth to 11th in 1 year, and we have swapped with China. So yeah, maybe somebody was paid. Maybe there was some financial transaction that happened. I don't know. These days, there is this concerted effort to kind of push India down, denigrate India. Uh, as India rises in terms of hard power and geopolitical relevance, they're trying to push India down in other ways to kind of affect the morale of the people of India and to kind of create a certain impression of India. The people should not realize in the Western world, especially, that India is rising. So put India down in other ways. Uh, Claim that India is number 385 in the world happiness rankings, let's say, or 782, or whatever it is, and say that India is no longer a democracy. India is an authoritarian nation. So put India 111th in the world democracy index or whatever, and so on. So these are just mind games that they are playing. In sports, we have something called sledging, especially in team sports. So if you play cricket and you're typically doing the batting, then the opposition team, the bowlers, the fielders, they're going to try and intimidate you and disparage you and mock you, abuse you. The Australians used to be really good at this. So that's the same kind of thing the West is doing to India today. We need to just ignore it. Enjoy the cuisine you enjoy. You like Indian food, enjoy it. Forget about other people's opinions. How do people's opinions matter? I personally like all kinds of cuisines, but obviously Indian cuisine is the best. So as far as I'm concerned, India is number one in the world rankings of in cuisine. Okay. Uh, and, uh, Tamil or Sanskrit, which is older? And did they both evolve with each other? I'm not getting into this. I have taken this question so many times. There's always this war going on. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Both are Indian languages. India is the oldest civilization. Both are the oldest. Both are number one. There we have it. Okay. Do voice call question answer for your Discord server members the request? Okay, I'll look into that. All right, sure. If China attacks India, is there a chance India might win the war? It depends on the context. It depends on the scale of the war. See, if India and China actually go to war, hypothetically, it cannot be more than a limited war. Because if it goes beyond a limited war, red lines are crossed. And if red lines are crossed, both nations stand to lose a lot. China stands to lose more. They stand to lose everything they have worked for in the last 40 years. Neither nation can afford a war going beyond a limited war. And when you have a war that starts, even if it's a limited war, you never know what is going to happen. In the fog of war, anything can happen. The best thing is there should be no war. Beyond the threats and abuse and saber rattling and all, and the fist fights and the stick fights, nothing beyond that. But if China does attack India, well, if it's a limited war, India can defeat China in that. And China may end up losing some territory because a war in the Himalayas cannot involve tanks. It will involve artillery, but it will involve a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, man-to-man fighting. And today, the Indian army is not short on arms and ammunition like in the Nehruvian days in 1962. And today, we have the infrastructure, the roads, and all that. And the Chinese positions are very badly exposed in Tibet. There's no vegetation in Tibet. It's all exposed. So they're building tunnels and all that. But yeah, we can deal with that too. So I don't think the Chinese stand to win a local war, a localized, limited war. They may end up being on the losing side. And if that happens, you know, the Chinese Communist Party is a different kind of beast. They don't tolerate failure. And if there is a failure, the person at the top is held accountable. And it never ends well in that scenario. So the Chinese won't attack India. If they attack India, they may end up losing. If they end up being on the verge of losing, they may be tempted to expand the war beyond a local war. The moment you expand the war beyond a local war and you hit certain targets in India, all bets are off. So you don't want to be in that position, because we're talking about the thing that we shall not talk about, which is the nuclear option. We don't ever want that to come into play. So I think the Chinese aren't mad. They have some sanity. They're not crazy people. I don't think it's going to happen. If there's a war in the future, it will not be started by India. That is a guarantee. India won't start it. So it's up to the Chinese. Do you guys want a war? We don't want a war. We won't start one. If a war happens, you're going to start it. So have some sense and don't start a war. That's it. Okay. Karan Nalavat says, can mathematics students work in the field of cosmology? Of course, you can work in the field of cosmology. All you need to do physics is mathematics. If you are good at math, you can do any physics. Learning the basic principles of physics is so easy if you know math. It's a piece of cake. You already have the tools needed. It may take you just a couple of weeks to understand the basic concepts of physics, because you already have the tools, the math. You don't have, the main problem that physics students face is to have to learn the math needed to solve physics problems. But a math student already has that knowledge. It's actually easy. Cosmology is, I mean, yeah, it's easy. No big deal. The only real problem that students who want to learn physics face is that you have to first learn the math, and pretty complex math at that. Well, tensor calculus is kind of complex. Uh, Linear algebra, matrices, differential equations, set theory, and so on and so forth. So math students already have many of these tools. So it's actually easy for them. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We have crossed 2 hours. So we are coming to the end of today's session. Let's see. Let's see if I can take a couple more interesting questions. Okay. Mane says, have you read the novels by S.L Bhirappa? I have not yet read those novels. I've heard they're really good. What is it called? Avaran, The Wheel, and maybe a couple other books. I haven't read them yet. I've heard they're really good. Okay. Okay, where else are we? What else are we doing? Okay, Siddharth Singh Rajpurohit says, we haven't explored most of the Earth. Is there a possibility of another human species other than Homo sapiens without our knowledge? We have explored the entire surface of the Earth. We have satellite mapping, we have satellite technology. There is no part of the surface of the Earth that has not been explored. That's for sure. Okay, maybe there could be the Yeti living in some parts of the Himalayas because the Himalayas are so inaccessible. Okay, perhaps. Maybe there's a small possibility that the Yeti, the Migoi, exists in Sikkim and Tibet and Ladakh or whatever. But that possibility is small. Apart from the Himalayas and apart from some places, we've kind of seen everything. And even when it comes to the Himalayas, we can still see what's happening through satellite images, even though humans may not have reached every part of the Himalayas because it's so inaccessible, inhospitable, and so on. So it is very, very, very unlikely that there is another human species somewhere right now. In the past, when it comes to parts of Indonesia, Sulawesi or whatever, there was this hobbit species that kind of died out apparently about 10,000 years ago or something. But overall, I believe that on balance, the likelihood of another human species existing today is extremely low, extremely low. Okay. In Francis wanted to say thank you and Dandavat Pranam to you for being a teacher we could never get in our schools. May Sri Ram bless you with happiness and prosperity. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay. So many questions. Let's see. Is it true that India lost 2,000 kilometers, square kilometers land to China and Ladakh as per Wikipedia? What is Aksai map? Look here. This is the Indian version of Google Maps. You use the American version or any non-Indian version of Google Maps, you'll see a different variety of map. So this entire region here, you see Pangong Lake. This here is Pangong Lake. North of Pangong Lake, north of Gogra hot springs and all, this entire region is occupied by China right now. I'm sure it's a significant territory. Then you have parts of Uttarakhand, etc., small parts that are occupied by China, and so on. The border is not defined in 1962 and even before that, and sometimes even after that, the Chinese have taken, grabbed significant portions of Indian territory. And they have kept on and they've kept up with those salami slicing tactics. The same tactics they use in the South China Sea with the Philippines, with Vietnam, with other countries, the same thing they have been doing with India. Whatever territory we have lost to China in Ladakh and other parts of India happened during the time of Nehru and before 2014. Of course, we have lost it. I have been there. I have videos on this channel reporting from Chushul, reporting from other places. You can see Chinese occupied Ladakh from there. You can see the Chinese highway, the highway they have built. You can see Chinese vehicles there. And you can feel the Chinese binoculars on your face. You can feel it. You can see the bunkers on the hills. We have lost territory. It's not happened since 2014. It's all happened before 2014. After 2014, the government of India has ramped up construction, infrastructure building efforts. And that's why there have been so many clashes with the Chinese, because they are now ruffled. They are worried. It's no longer the previous governments who will let the Chinese do whatever they want. So India has lost territory. 62 is the major loss. After 62 also, they have been slicing away at Indian territory. Now they can't. And that's the problem from their perspective. So yes, we have lost territory. But those idiots who say it's because of Modi, what nonsense. What delusional, idiotic world are they living in? It really annoys me. Really annoys me that people won't think with their brains that the gods have given them. They will simply listen to the opinions of influencers without actually opening a book or opening a map or reading up a little bit. Because reading takes effort, right? Thinking is hard work. I don't want to think. I'll simply swallow other people's opinions. So frustrating. So frustrating. Okay. Ujjwal says Yeti doesn't exist. Well, some people say God doesn't exist because they've never seen God. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I also haven't seen a Yeti. I haven't seen a blue whale. So from my perspective, I can claim the blue whale doesn't exist. Look, like I said, the probability of an unknown species of humanoid existing in Sikkim, in Ladakh, in Tibet is very low, but it is not zero. You cannot claim to know everything that happens in the world. You can't have that certainty. So people who say that God doesn't exist, have you seen the entire universe? 95% of the universe is dark. We don't know what's happening in 95% of the universe. So how can you claim you understand the entire universe and you know for sure that God or whatever else doesn't exist? How can you make the claim? To make that claim, you actually need to be God yourself. It's so illogical that people come up with these absolute claims. It actually, well, it's kind of an indicator of the intelligence of a person. Okay. Swami Jen says, please wish me luck. I have JEE main on 8th of April. All the best, sir. Do well. Do really well. I hope that you have studied sufficiently. Now trust your studies, trust the hard work, and I hope that you get the best possible result. All the best. Okay, okay. So now where are we? Let me take one more question. It's 2 hours, 10 minutes. And let us see. Um, Babar Kadabar says, when do you see the Russia versus Ukraine war ending? Is there any possibility of NATO sending its troops in the future? The NATO coalition seems to be considering sending troops into Ukraine. Maybe there's a chance they may send them to Odessa or somewhere in the southern part of Ukraine. That would be a tremendously dangerous red line to cross, because then you will have direct confrontation between Russia and NATO instead of the proxy war that's happening right now. That would be bad escalation. Okay. Uh, when do I see this war ending? Not anytime soon. Eventually, it will end with the partition of Ukraine. It will end on the terms of Russia, most likely. Russia is no pushover. It's the second most powerful nation on the planet, way more powerful than China, unlike what people think. So it's going to end on Russia's terms whenever Russia wants to end it, not anytime soon. And if NATO sends troops, it's going to take us closer to nuclear war, actually. I hope it doesn't happen. Mr. Macron has been talking about sending French troops and all. Are you people serious? Seriously? What's he going to gain from this? Anyhow, so yeah, not anytime soon is what it looks like. I could, of course, be wrong, but we'll see. Geopolitical Dubey says connection between Konark and Karnak. I don't see any connection. I'm not aware of any connection. The names sound kind of similar. Karnak in Egypt, Konark in India, in Bharat, in Kalinga, but I don't know if there is any actual connection. Sometimes there are in French, in the French language, they call certain words faux amis, false friends. For example, in French, the word for clothing is habit, Habit. The same word habit means habit in English, but totally different words and no connection, with the same spelling. So these are false friends or faux amis, like the French say in French. So sometimes you have such words, such names like Konark and Karnak, which may not actually have any real connection. So as far as I know, I have not seen any connection between the two. All right, that brings us to the end of today's session. Once again, 2 hours, 12 minutes plus. Thank you so much for all the questions, for all the wonderful questions. Apologies once again to all those of you whose questions I could not take. There are thousands of questions, and I only have 2 hours, a little bit more than 2 hours. But I'll keep on doing this, and eventually, hopefully, everybody gets to have me answer the question. So thank you once again for being on this live stream with me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your viewership. Thank you for your support. Keep raising your standards. All the best. And I will see you in a week or two in the next live stream. Thank you. Good day, goodbye, and good night, wherever you are. See you soon.